Mega Man Maverick Hunter X, released in 2005/2006 depending on where you live for Sony's PlayStation Portable Handheld unit, was the other Mega Man side-scrolling remake thing made for the system alongside Mega Man Powered Up. And just as Powered Up was a remake of the original Mega Man from 1987, Maverick Hunter X is a remake of the original Mega Man X from 1993. Both games were intended to be the launching point for a new set of remakes of all the old games on the consoles, but nobody bought them. Probably because it was on PSP and not on a console or something. Probably because they were remakes of old games that were still easily accessible via various collections available at the time, and in the case of X, still stand the test of time. In any event, plans for future Powered Up and Maverick Hunter X games were killed off, and this is ultimately all we got, much to the chagrin of many Mega Man fans who were probably hoping for more of these remakes. I, on the other hand, was largely ambivalent towards the idea. Powered Up was a perfectly fine game, don't get me wrong, but I spent more time in that game's level editor and making my own custom levels, which gave Powered Up its replay value. And it was for that reason alone that saw me revisiting Powered Up every so often. Maverick Hunter X, on the other hand, didn't enjoy that kind of staying power, and I often wonder why that was. Maybe because the game that served as the inspiration for this title, Mega Man X on Super Nintendo, still holds up and was fun to revisit every so often. Hell, I'd even pop out the Game Boy Color release, Mega Man Extreme, every once in a while, mostly for the novelty more than the nostalgia. And so for the first time in a long time, I went back and played Maverick Hunter X, gave it the time of day, played through both its modes, and after all was said and done, what I got out of the experience was a perfectly fine Mega Man X title, totally functional, somewhat enjoyable at times, but ultimately reminded me too much of a game that I'd much rather be playing right now. How's that for a hook? Okay, so we start the game and there's more talking bits than usual. Okay, fine, that's the new normal. Let's keep going, let's kill this dude. Ah, there's a wall there, let's... Oh, no. Oh, the shots don't go through... The shots don't go through the walls? Are you fucking kidding me? The shots, the lemons stop at solid objects. In a remake of Mega Man X, where the shots passed... Oh, fuck this game. I'm going back to Super Nintendo. Okay, now, let's be fair here. Not every weapon is affected by this new physics mechanic. Maverick weapons such as Storm Tornado and Boomerang Cutter still pass through walls. The latter pretty much has to if it's going to do its gimmick of grabbing items that are out of reach, which is necessary for a couple upgrades, but still, this feels like a step down, and this isn't the only time that something would feel like a step down, but we're getting ahead of ourselves here. Maverick Hunter X follows the basic template of the original Mega Man X game in many ways. Aside from the formula used, an intro level, 8 Mavericks, and a final set of Sigma levels, a lot of the original game's elements have been recreated. Levels play out similarly to what you've seen on the Super Nintendo version. The gameplay is pretty much the same. There's nothing necessarily new or out of the ordinary at first. It's Mega Man X taken from 16 bits and re-envisioned with spiffy new 3D graphics, more vocal bits, and a reduced field of vision. This is a portable game on a portable device after all, so that's to be expected. Oh, and there's more story bits. Talking heads pop up during a couple key moments, but mostly these are relegated to pre-fight dialogue with the Maverick bosses. They personally do nothing for me, especially after playing through the game multiple times, but for those who want more lore building and expanded storytelling, this is a bit of a treat, and to be fair, they're done well if nothing else. More on this later. Like in X1, there are sub-tanks, heart containers, and armor upgrades to locate, and the armor operates the same as it did in X1. Boots make you dash, helmet protects your head and gives you a headbutt to break bricks, armor protects you a bit, and Buster upgrade gives you an extra charge level that actually feels weaker than in the original game, which is quite disconcerting, as well as let you charge any master weapons you may have gained, which for the most part remain the same as before. Mind you, they could have changed the armor around to make it more in line with what came afterwards, with air dashing and such and things of that nature, but they kept it close to the original armor specs, and I appreciate that they maintained that bit of continuity. Now what has changed is the placement of these items. The leg part, for example, is no longer out in the open in Chill Penguin stage like it was in the Super Nintendo version, but rather in an easily accessible shaft in Flame Mammoth stage. For the most part, stuff's merely been moved around, but otherwise, most of it's in the same place, though a couple items are in new spots entirely that you'll have to look around for, but it's never anywhere too baffling. It mixes things up a bit, but nothing too drastic, and I suppose if you ever want to go for a Vanilla X armorless run, getting those leg parts out of the main path of Chill Penguin will certainly make that a reality if you want to go that route. Another change is Zero's Buster. If you didn't get the Buster upgrade by the time Zero bites the dust, sorry if I spoiled the movie for anybody, Zero will give you his own Buster, and while this merely meant another means of getting the arm upgrade in the 16-bit original, here it's actually its own thing, which would make sense in a continuity perspective because one thing is not like the other. Actually, one thing is lamer looking than the other, but probably more useful or something. I don't know, I never go for the Zero Buster, it's usually lame. In a clever twist, Maverick Hunter X does something interesting with the final Sigma levels. Up until that point, it's been roughly familiar territory. Levels recreated from the source with some minor changes here and there to take the new engine into account. To be honest, there are times where it almost felt like a carbon copy, except in some regards that make it feel like a lesser copy at times, to the point where you begin to question what the whole point of this exercise was in the first place. But then you hit Sigma level 1, and rather than hopping the platforms like you did in the 16-bit version, you're going underwater and fighting sea creatures. Level 2 has you taking on the crab tanks. Holy balls, they actually redid the Sigma levels! There's new segments to contend with. You don't even fight Vile until just before the fight with the D-Rex tank in the 3rd level. It's a nice little surprise actually to get something resembling new levels in this Mega Man X remake, and they merely reuse more elements from what came before. It's the first time that I actually found myself enjoying Maverick Hunter X on its own merits. It's just too bad that by the time this gets really good, the game's already over. Oh well. Maverick Hunter X is a perfectly fine, perfectly functional game that's a remake of a game that really didn't need one in the first place, much less another one after Mega Man Extreme on Game Boy Color took a crack at some of the game at least. That's my only real gripe with the game. It recreates the levels, the enemies, the weapons to a degree where it's close to the source but not quite there yet, and only serves to remind me of a game that I'd much rather be playing. Sure, you moved a couple of things around for it to be different, but not necessarily worthwhile. Maybe a couple new things gameplay-wise that would have made the experience better. Keyword being better, not worse. But let's set aside the remake portion of the equation. How does Maverick Hunter X stand on its own merits? Honestly, it plays well enough. Control's pretty solid for the most part and works as well as you'd expect. Wall jumping off a dash doesn't quite work all that well at times, but that's a minor thing. The additional exposition contributes more background lore for those who want it. The levels are fairly straightforward and doesn't resort to anything like wonky gimmicks or dynamic camera perspectives, no unwanted ride chaser sequences or anything like that. Compared to, say, games like X7 or X8, Maverick Hunter fares way better than either of those two ever did. And don't worry, we'll eventually get to those soon enough. Maverick Hunter X doesn't have an old school mode that mimics the old game like Powered Up does, unless you want to consider the whole game an old school mode. But when you beat the game, you'll unlock Vile mode, which lets you play as Vile and his numerous weapons from his arms, cannons, and knees. It's something different and perhaps a bit unique, and I like that Vile mode has its own story to it, so there's some actual care put into it instead of just, here's an alternate character for shits and giggles like most Igavania stuff. But it's not something I'd go back to every so often, and quite frankly, I don't find Vile to be as fun to play with as a Zero or even an Axel from X8, but it is something different for those who want it. There's also a bonus little anime movie called The Day of Sigma, which is a sort of prequel to the game and changes the narrative of the old game, which probably would have made more sense had there been more remakes, but just feels awkward and out of place. Oh noes, Dr. Kane has been blown up. Oh wait, he's fine now. Oops. Animation performance-wise, it's fine. The plot's kind of lame, but that's okay. There's some animated bits during the main game, though you mostly have talking heads. By the way, The Day of Sigma is a bonus feature in the Mega Man X Legacy collections if you want to check that out much more easily. Just a thought. Maverick Hunter X ditches the old sprite work of the SNES original and replaces it with polygons and 3D models and stuff. They look alright for the most part, recreating the things they're supposed to recreate well enough. It's fairly consistent in terms of performance, with maybe a minute bit of slowdown and clipping along the way. The widescreen aspect and making everything bigger means less overall visibility, and especially less on-screen real estate as it relates to boss battles and such. However, this is a somewhat common ailment with these portable Mega Man games. I'll admit to not being a fan of the visual style in general, but it looks fine otherwise. Because this was made in 2006 and we're using a disc-based medium, there are animated cutscenes, and even the intermission bits with dialogue have voice acting, provided by the Ocean Group, I think they were called, who gave us the wonderful performances of Mega Man X8. And I'm being genuine in that regard, because the voice acting here is pretty solid stuff, whether it's the in-game bits or the animated bits, including the mini-movie. I have no complaints about the voice acting here. It's pretty good. I mean, any cast that can take really clunky, nonsensical dialogue and turn it into something decent deserves all the praise in the world, but even the dialogue isn't too bad despite the lame plotting, so kudos to them. And with that, we transition into the sound, and of course, this being a remake of an old game, we need to touch on the remix soundtrack, which to its credit does not sound like some lame-ass lounge music like an X3's CD port. Some of the remixes are pretty good, even if they're lacking a bit of the punch that the original chiptunes had, while others are just kind of sort of there. And then there's Armored Armadillo's theme, which is just bad, especially the beginning. And while Vile might have a bangin' theme for his mode, I don't think I need to hear it for the entire playthrough of that mode. It gets old really fast. Sound effects are the stock sound effects from prior X games on the PlayStation era. The little voice grunts and weapon calls are somewhat annoying, but that's the world we live in, and I hate it. Oh boy. Okay, I will admit, this is a tough one for me to gauge because I am of two minds when it comes to Mega Man Maverick Hunter X. For one, in terms of the gameplay and such, it's pretty good barring some minor quibbles. Made the most of its portable housing, doesn't veer off into needless digression that detracts from the experience, and when it does do its own thing, as rare as that may be, it's actually quite fun. Some of the extra stuff adds a bit more value to the package, but the core play is solid and would have benefited from something a little more, a more original outing, as it were. And that's the real kicker here, because while Maverick Hunter X is a perfectly fine Mega Man X, and dare I say, possibly the best non-16-bit Mega Man X entry that I've played, and I'm not being hyperbolic about this, I really do believe that. But it's also a remake of a game that quite frankly didn't really need one. I mean, cool, they did an admirable job of recreating the assets in this new style and added some bits that were kind of neat if not superfluous. But it felt to me like a lesser recreation of a game that came out years prior on lesser hardware and just did it better. Mega Man X was a game that did it right the first time, and Maverick Hunter X doesn't really do anything truly worthwhile to justify its existence. Look, I am more than likely in the minority because there's a contingent who believe Maverick Hunter X is a perfectly fine remake, and you know what? More power to you folks, and I'm sure you would have liked to see the rest of the series remade in this fashion. But to me, a game of this style would have benefited from something more original and unique while sticking with this style of play. And at the end of the day, Maverick Hunter X is the best playing Mega Man X game not on the Super Nintendo, and I found it to be much more enjoyable than any of the post-16-bit outings. But imagine how much of a better game it could have been had it not been a remake of a superior title. And that is the sad tale of Mega Man Maverick Hunter X for the PlayStation Portable. It's worth a shot if you could track down the means to play it, but the original Mega Man X, available much more widely, will suit your needs just fine.